I'd like to welcome you all here to our webinar today. Today we have Mark Luty from Frog Coaching Squad, and I'm just going to check a few things before we get started, however, before we hand over to Mark. If you can hear me at the moment, my name's Donna, of course, for those of you who have attended our webinars before. If you can hear me, can you just raise your hand on your control panel? Now, on your control panel, you'll have a little picture or a little icon that looks like a hand. You could just raise your hand so I can see whether you can hear me or not. Okay, I've got a couple of hands up there. If I could have a few more, that would be great. Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, and I'm just going to get you to repeat the exercise. If you can see on the picture, the overcoming average or mediocre with the fabulous frog on the page, you could also raise your hand for that as well, so I can see that you can see what's on Mark's screen. So if you could just raise your hand for that. Okay, and if we can have a few more hands, that would be fantastic. Okay, so hopefully everybody can hear and see. That's excellent, thank you very much. All right. So for today, we're really lucky that we have Mark with us. And just a bit of information about Mark, if you haven't heard about him before. Mark has been, I've got a bit of a blurb here that I'd just like to read out. In just 30 action-packed years, working with some of the world's best-known brands, including Dermalogica and State, Mark has built a reputation as a world-class sales, marketing and education leader. Now, people who have worked with Mark and his teams remember him for his contagious enthusiasm and the fun that they've had together. His employers all remember him for having consistently smashed budgets and grown their business exponentially. Mark's goals with each of his selling clients are simple. Whatever they want more of, he makes sure it happens. Whether that's more money, happier staff, more time away from work, or just seeing that people succeed and have fun. And that's what Mark tries to bring. So if you need a no excuses person to help you grow, then I'd recommend that you have a chat with Mark. Okay, so speaking of Mark, are you there, Mark?
Yes, I am.
Great.
Thank you for that, Donna.
Right, I'm going to hand over to you now, so away you go.
Okay, thank you for joining us this morning. The topic, overcoming average or mediocre. So I guess the first question, or the first logical question for everyone is, what is average or mediocre? And I guess in my experience, every salon is different. Everyone has their own challenges. Everyone has hopefully rock stars in your team that really do set the standards high. But as well as that, I suspect you're going to have people in the middle and maybe people that are still growing. Here's some, if you like, some behaviours that might help define that that question. Do you ever find yourself paying two different people the same amount of money for significantly different levels of performance? Is there someone on your team who consistently underperforms that seems quite happy with what they earn? Does anyone in your team swing from great performance to hopeless performance depending entirely on their moods? If you offer commission or bonuses, do you have people in your team who frequently or never earn more than their basic wage? I guess for me, they are examples of average or mediocre. And of course the challenge for us is, what do we do about that? So next question, what do you expect? And for me this kind of speaks to the heart of it. Have you clearly defined for your team what you expect from them each week? Now all of us have different KPIs or numbers that we track, but let's just keep this nice and simple. What's the revenue that you expect from each member of your team each week? And if you have a number, which I sincerely hope you do, and if not, by the end of this session I'm going to ask you to make sure you do, does every member of the team know their number, and do they know how they're tracking? Okay, because there's two important things there. The most important thing, of course, is first you've got to have a number, but then how are people performing towards it? Just as important is that we've just had a huge weekend here in Australia of grand finals, and I know the All Blacks also had a great game in the weekend. How enjoyable would those events be if none of us knew the score? How would they be if the players themselves didn't know the score? When your team's driving home from work, how do they know if they've had a great day? Do you absolutely make sure that they understand the importance of it? There's a famous quote from Tom Peters: what gets measured gets done. Anyhow, let me move on from that. So for those of you who are not really sure what the number should be, and I guess this is something I get asked a lot, let's have a look at it this way. What's a great week's turnover by your top employee on a non-Christmas week? Okay, so think of your rock star, think of your top employee, and think of what is a great week for them. And as I've said, it doesn't necessarily have to be a Christmas week. And of course that varies a lot. I mean, I've got salons that you know, they can get up to $5,000 and $6,000 a week. I've got others that, you know, $2,000 a week's a great week. So write that number down. Now here's my question: if everyone in your business achieved that figure 80% of the time, would that make a big difference to your annual turnover or your annual profit? And of course the answer to that is it would make a huge difference. So let me talk a little bit more about this number. Sometimes we're tempted just to put great numbers down, and we might say, right, look, I expect $4,000 from every member of my team. Your number's got to have credibility, because quite frankly, if no one on your team has ever given you $4,000 a week except at Christmas, then I suspect your expectations are a little bit unrealistic. So hence it's important to look at what is happening in your business right now. Now for some of you, you might be the ones that are giving them that great week. You know, that your number might be the highest. Now you do need to think about that, because as an owner, you're obviously, your motivation is absolutely amazing. Does that mean to say that no one on your team can hit that number? Definitely not. But just take that into consideration as well. Okay, so you've got a number. That is the first key to it. Second, having the number, sharing it with your team, putting it up there, is of course an important part to it. But the next part is, does your team know what you think of their performance? Okay, how often do you discuss their performance with them? Do you discuss it daily, weekly, monthly, or perhaps when you have the time? Now this next little quote here, I really want you to write it down, make sure that you really get your head around this. Behaviour you don't comment on, you condone. Okay, sometimes we fall into the trap of saying, right, here's your targets everyone, and let's just choose $3,000. That's what I expect from everyone to perform each week. Mary comes in at $3,500, Nicole comes in at $2,000, John comes in at $6,000, whatever it is. You've got to comment on that, because if you don't comment on it, particularly the ones who don't make target, if you don't comment on it, you're basically sending a very clear message to them that it doesn't matter. Okay? Behaviour you don't comment on, you condone. And it kind of, you know, another thing that I was once told is that we need to treat our team as well as we treat our number one client. And a lot of us, I think, sometimes fall into the trap of perhaps not spending enough time with our team. Or, you know, I've often heard owners saying to me, Mark, that takes an awful lot of time. You know, I'm also busy. I've got my own clients to look after. I've got my own column. When am I going to get time to comment and have these meetings with all of my team to discuss this sort of thing? It kind of begs the question, how important is each member of your team to you? And then if you do the maths, it's kind of a fairly easy one. If you take your best client, you know, maybe it's a $200 appointment client, and you're going to see them, if you see them every 6 weeks, that's about 8 times a year, so there's $1,600. an average member of your team, if they're performing at about $2,000 a week, of course, there's $100,000. So hopefully that's an easy way for you to kind of reconnect on the importance of your team. Those daily, weekly, monthly catch-ups are incredibly important. So let me just recap on our first steps here to overcoming average or mediocre. Step number 1, make sure you set a weekly target. Step number 2, track everyone's performance. Okay. Step number 3, discuss their results. Now there are 3 ways to discuss their results that I'm suggesting there. One of my favourites is what we call daily zaps. And they are pretty much what they sound. That's just a check-in every day on how someone has done either the day before, or you might be doing it based on their day's performance. Now we're very fortunate, of course, with Katoomba that we can very easily see at a glance, just on that business summary, how everyone's performing. So either at the end of the previous day or at the beginning of a business day, just sit down, gather the numbers so that you're well armed and you know exactly what your team's up to. A daily zap is quite simply, hey John, great day yesterday. Saw that you came really close to your target. That's the strongest you've been at this point for the week. Really appreciate that. It might be, hey Mary, fantastic rebooking yesterday. Absolutely huge. Really appreciate it. You're commenting, and you'll get better at this as you get used to it. You look for ways that you can really give your team a boost. Okay? And it can be based on their income. It could be an amazing client service. It could be a rebooking. It could be a retail. It could be a treatment. Doesn't matter what it is, but it's just giving them that constant recognition, that daily zap. Once a week, I know many of you do, and I think it's always a fantastic idea to have that quick team meeting. And the first thing on your weekly team meetings agenda is going to be just to fly the flag for last week. Team, great week last week. We're on target. We came close to target. We exceeded target. Special thanks to Fiona. Absolutely nailed your target. You were the highest percentage over the target of anyone on the team. Mary, you also hit your target. Peter, you hit your target. The others came really close. Appreciate the effort. Best rebooking was John. I mean, you kind of get the feel for it. So in that weekly meeting, the first part of your weekly meeting is acknowledging everyone's performance. Then you'll go on to whatever the focus is today or what the focus is for the following week. Then, of course, your monthly one-on-one meeting, which is, Donna, maybe you and I should set some times on this, but just doing that catch-up with every member of your team, one-on-one, so that you can discuss how they're tracking and kind of that big picture for them. So they are the key steps for me for absolutely overcoming average and mediocre. How do I have great meetings? How do I actually get that message across? Now here is a very cool quote from Stephen Covey. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with him, made famous probably back in the 80s and 90s with a book called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Please read it if you haven't. It's a great read and it's still incredibly relevant. But he came up with this concept of start with the end in mind. And for me, this is one of those things that in all my years of managing people, which I decided is about 35, this is one of those things I really wish that I'd learned a lot earlier on in my management career. Because it speaks to the goal that you actually want people to end up with. And more importantly, it puts the focus on them rather than you. Okay, start with the end in mind. In the context that he first described it, it was actually when he was talking about mission statements. What's the service? What do you want that end goal to be? But here's an example of what I mean by this. So, imagine your staff member Nicole. Nicole, I've been reviewing your performance, looking at some of your great weeks, and I believe you could earn $75,000 a year. That's $1,450 per week. How do you feel about that? Now, it's important that you engage, in this case, Nicole, in that. Does that sound like a great sum of money? What would you do with that? Would that make a really big difference in your life? You've got to make sure that she's enthusiastic about it. I don't know about you, but I think $75,000 for Nicole is an extremely good level of income. Once you've had that part of it, then kind of here's where the key comes in. Okay, so now Nicole, to make this happen, that means every week you'd need to average about $4,350 in services and retail. So what do you think of that? I really think you could do it. I really believe that you've got the skill. Now, if you're as excited about it as me, I'd love to help you make that a reality. So you kind of get the feel for it. All too often we sit in front of our team and we tell them what we want. We tell them we've got bills to pay, we've got a salon to run, the pressure's on, all the woes of being an owner. Do we honestly think that motivates them? However, with a lovely little twist, start with the end in mind, it's the same conversation because it ends with you and Nicole sitting down and making a plan, but it just changes it up. Sometimes I kind of think of those of us that have raised our children, or perhaps some of you that are in the process of raising your children. I'm guilty of saying, tidy your room, tidy your room, tidy your room, tidy your room. Not once did I ever think of saying, hey kids, do you want to go to the movies this afternoon? Great. Well, okay, there's a couple of things we need to do. First, I need you to tidy your rooms. Then I need you to brush your teeth, get ready, and let's go to an amazing movie. I can promise you the attitude my children would have had to tidying their room would have been completely different. And sometimes when we put it in that context, it gives us the clarity we need. It applies to many of the conversations we have with our team. But in this case, I think it's a really, really important one. So start with the end in mind. When you're having these meetings with your team, when you're talking about, for those of you that haven't given your team those weekly targets, it's a great way to get them focused. And of course, the end result for you is going to be incredibly important. So let's continue. Let's say we've got Nicole all enthusiastic, same as the rest of the team, and we're off. I've mentioned about tracking their numbers daily, and one of the key things here is we've got to catch them winning. There's been many a person that's had the big lecture on rebooking or retail or hitting a particular retail number, and they finally do it, and what happens? Nothing. They're left thinking, well, what the heck was all that fuss about? I finally hit that rebooking. I finally rebooked 70% of my clients or sold 3 products, and nothing. No one cares, and they very quickly go back to their old way. So it's really, really important to track their numbers, and in this case we're looking to catch them winning. The individual and team recognition is key. I mentioned before about that weekly team meeting where you got the opportunity to recognise members of your team in front of their peers. It is really, really powerful. Incentives are fun. Now, we don't have to spend an awful lot of money on this, but the fun aspect is really, really good. It could be anything from morning teas. It could be some bubbles and chocolate strawberries. Get inventive with this. Competitions amongst your team are fun. One of the things that we do in our little frog coaching world is we run competitions against different salons. That's a huge amount of fun. Challenges, fun consequences, and again, you're going to love this. Sometimes the motivation of winning doesn't do it for some people, but it's the motivation of not losing that does, particularly if there's a consequence. One of the ones that I'm doing with a few of my teams at the moment is putting them in pairs, and the losing pair has to provide morning tea for the winners. But in this case, it has to be home cooked. They cannot buy anything. And that's been great motivation. We've had a lot of fun with it. Put up a great scoreboard. Now, Again, the things that surprise you. It's the fun stuff. It's, it's putting stars and spots and the stuff that we actually enjoyed doing as kids. One of the things I've realized is the older we get, the more we enjoy behaving and sometimes doing the things that we did as we were kids. The key here, I guess, is to keep it light. Okay? So make sure that your team's got lots of energy around it and kind of keep the fun part. Now, catching people winning, I think most of you would agree that's the good part. That's the easy part. However, what about dealing with the misses? Okay? So some real important tricks here for you. First of all, of course, I'm going to say resist the doom and gloom approach. That typical old-fashioned management approach of, not quite get the stick out, but I know some of you would still love to be able to do that. Please resist it. It's about asking the right questions, and again, it does depend a little bit on the personality of each member of your team. But if you're on a retail challenge or a revenue, in this case we're talking about revenue, and you've noticed Nicole is having a really, really quiet time. The first question that you need to ask her is, Nicole, how are you getting on with your revenue target? Now, of course, she knows that you know, and you know that she knows that you know, but it's a nice open question, and it's going to stop Nicole from becoming defensive. Now, her answer to that's probably going to be, oh, look, it's terrible. I can't seem to get anywhere this week. And that gives you and Nicole an opportunity to talk about it. And you might say, yeah, look, I mean, I've got to remind them of their previous personal best. Nicole, I remember this time last week you were sitting at about $3.5 grand already. You were having a fantastic week, girl. I know you can do it. Would you like me to help you? Is there some stuff we can go through? What do you think's getting in the way? So straight away, by asking the right questions to begin with, you and Nicole are going to solve it together. The next point I'm talking here, catch them early. Now, if it's a week that we're talking here, say a Tuesday to a Saturday, there's no point having a conversation with Nicole halfway through the Friday. Your week's over. One of the things that I'm aware of is that very rarely did someone miss a target based on the last few days of the month or the week, or maybe the week they can. But, typically if someone's off their game, it happens early, and you need to catch it early. So I would suggest 1 or 2 days of not much action means it's time that you have that quick chat. And I put there the phrase unhook them. When someone has a bad day, then they obviously get a bit demotivated by it. 2 bad days in a row and they're starting to think the week's gone. You have 3 bad days, they're likely to go, oh, look, I'm not going to hit my target this week, so let's forget it. I'll focus on next week. Now you need to unhook them from that mentality and start them again. Fresh personal challenge or a fresh restart. So I'm going to say, hey Nicole, look, I know Tuesday, Wednesday's been very, very quiet, but that's gone, girl. So who have we got today? How busy is today? How many clients have you got in today? Right, what's your number? So you're restarting them, and you might just say, okay, why don't you and I have a little bit of a personal challenge? There's morning tea tomorrow. I think that you can give us a $1,500 day. What do you think? And maybe have that competition. Okay? Again, keep it light. Okay, another question that I get asked a lot. Does it always have to be about the money? The answer to that is yes and no. And my standing joke is try not paying them. You might have someone on the team that says, oh no, I don't work for money. That doesn't motivate me. Well, I'm sorry, but if you stop paying them, I'm pretty sure they'll put their hand up real quick. But for those of you, I don't know how many of you have ever watched TED Talks. It's kind of a fun place to go. But they did this amazing debate on can money buy you happiness? And the winners, basically, their story was yes, it can, provided you spend it on the right things, which of course is very, very true. So what we know about it is while money itself on its own may not motivate everyone, the fact is money gives us choices. So Nicole may not be working for money, but you know, that his sister's wedding that's coming up, that little black dress in the front window, that new car, a long weekend with her girlfriends, a big night out with her partner, a holiday, moving out of home, buying a house. All of these things require money. And the trick for you is to know your team well enough, and I'm going to come to this, and know what motivates them so that you can help them achieve their goals. And at the end of the day, it is going to be about the money, okay? But sometimes it's the language that we use that can help that. So I'm kind of coming towards the end of it here. So a couple of things I really want to finish on. What are the most powerful words you can tell a person? I think it was a Tom Peters quote. I believe in you. The research that he did in Europe many, many years ago, where they researched a whole lot of employees about what are the qualities of amazing bosses. And the one that came out head and shoulders about from everyone across different cultures was a boss that believed in me. When your team knows that you believe in them, that's when the magic starts. And just a little footnote to any of you, if you've got someone on your team that you don't believe in, please put them out of their misery and let them go, because you know it, they'll know it as well. It's very, very hard to keep going forward when you've got someone on your team that you actually don't believe in. So you need to believe in everyone on your team. And if you don't, do something about it, please. But it's certainly really, really powerful. When your boss believes in you, anything is possible. Next question, how well do you know your team? And this kind of leads into everything that we've talked about. We do some personality profiling. We keep it pretty light. It's our shapes, for those of you who know Frog. That gives us an idea, you know, getting back to that conversation with Nicole. You know, if she's the squiggle or the circle, then she is going to want us to partner with her. Nicole, how about you and I get together and we can do a little bit of practicing and we can talk this through and we can get it sorted. But if she's more the square and the circle, the square and the triangle, she's not going to like that micromanaging at all. You know, the last thing she'll want is a cheerleader. She knows what to do. You just need to re-challenge her and let her do it. So understanding your team's personalities is very, very important. Also, what are their interests? What are their hobbies? What's their family situation? All of those things are going to help you motivate them. Knowing what their work goals are and also knowing what their personal goals are. Again, as we talked about in a couple of previous slides, it's not always going to be about the money. It kind of is, but it isn't. Their personal goal might be that new car. Well, that's going to cost money. But if you kind of hook into that, then you're going to be able to, again, motivate them. It's that start with the end in mind. And you know what? Conversations about the car that your stylist or therapist is looking to buy, just asking them about it in a kind of roundabout way is actually giving them a pep talk, because it's reminding them of their goal. And of course, what do they need to achieve it? They need to be hitting their target on a regular basis. Final slide. I've mentioned it a few times. Teams that have fun and get on well together perform extremely well. So please, make it part of your culture. Every salon has a different take on it, but it needs to be one of the drivers in amongst your team, because it certainly makes everything possible. And that brings me to the end.
It's
How
great.
are you doing time-wise? Oh, not too bad. Any questions?
Yeah, any questions? So if you've got some questions, if you just pop them into the question panel on your control panel, and then I can read those out for Mark to answer as we go. I just wanted to make a comment there, Mark. You mentioned about having fun, and from the learning perspective as well, people learn much better if they're actually enjoying what they're doing and having fun. So it's if you're enjoying what you're doing,
Definitely.
you're going to learn and you're going to try and achieve and so on. So it just makes it so much easier.
And the older we get, the more important that is.
I agree.
Sometimes we kind of forget the
Yeah,
serious, or we get caught up in the seriousness of life.
yeah, and I agree. Okay, let's just see if we've got any questions here. Okay, now's the time to pop your questions in. Now you might have a question that's not strictly about what we've covered today that you just want to ask Mark, then please pop that in as well. Okay, here we've got one. Okay, so how do you set targets for staff that are not measured based on revenue, that is technicians?
Um, So by technicians, I guess, are we talking maybe in a hair salon, a colorist, or in most salons there will be other KPIs that you can track. So if they're not generating an income for you, I'm struggling a little bit on that, to be honest. Is it if it's apprentices, then they can be part of the overall salon one. I would probably look to including them in a salon target. So if their role is supporting the team, then whatever the target that the team is going for, I would probably look to hook them in for that one rather than an individual.
Okay.
Again, thinking that they're going to be supporting everyone else on the team in their technical role.
Thank you. I hope that answers your question, Jackie. The next question we've got here from Anita is, what are some examples of fun incentives?
If you hit your target, oh look, there's a whole lot. If it's a team target, look, it might just be a night out at the movies. You might go laser strike. It might be, if we hit our team target, let's do pizza and a bottle of wine. Let's, depending on the age of your team, it might be let's just meet for champagne at the local bar. Movies are quite popular amongst teams. If you're looking at more individual ones, sometimes it can be, if you like, a Westfield voucher, something like that they can spend on anything, and from an owner's perspective, of course, then that makes it taxable. Sorry, it makes it a legitimate business expense. It can be as simple as a scratch kiwi. We have a lot of fun with sitting down with a team and giving them all an opportunity to earn $50,000 or $500,000, and what you're really talking about is a scratch kiwi, a scratch card rather. And it's the trick with that one is saying, okay, if you hit your target today, you get to scratch it. If you miss your target today, I get to scratch it. It's kind of an example of just keeping it nice and light and lots of fun. But here's another way around it, and I kind of love this. You don't always have to come up with the incentives. Sit down with your team and say, okay, what would you like your incentives to be? Give them a budget, be it $50 per person or $20 a person or $500 for the team, whatever it is, and ask them to, all of you, come up with at least 5 ideas of what you think great incentives would be, incentives that you would enjoy. So ask them to submit all those ideas to you. Then you can go through the list and tick which ones you think are appropriate. The male strippers may not be, don't know, entirely up to you. And then maybe you could get it down to the top 10 that everyone likes, and you could then just cut those, put them all out on a bit of paper, cut the little bits of paper up, put them all in a jar, and every time your team hit their target, someone puts their hand in and pulls out one of the incentives. So again, you can have a bit of fun with it. You'll be surprised what your team come up with.
Cool, that's great. Thanks, Mark. The next question I have is, when you're asking your senior to reach a figure, is the apprentice included in assisting, or should they have their own KPIs?
Well, I would suggest, again, it's going to be part of your own salon's culture. most of the time, in my experience, the apprentice would not be included in that KPI. They would, again, as the person suggests, have a separate one. And that typically is because your apprentices are looking after more than one stylist. Obviously, the stylist has that revenue target. If they hit it, that's great. In my experience, most of the time the apprentices would be on a different KPI. And they can be rewarded for the number of treatments they do. There'll be some other customer service standards that you can set that would give you the opportunity to reward them. Again, I kind of go back to that previous question. I think for the team, your apprentices and the support team can be rewarded when the team hits their target.
Okay, cool. And our last question for today, I think that's the last one we've got there. Oh no, hang on, we've got a couple more popping up. So we'll go with the next one, and mindful of our time. If you start new staff because you know they will eventually be one of your best operators, how do you fairly divide new clients so that you can keep your existing staff motivated and happy as well?
Well, I kind of have a different attitude on new clients, I guess. To me, your new clients should always go to your team that can rebook the best. So a couple of things for me. I would have a minimum rebooking standard, and in order for you to have the privilege of looking after new clients, your rebooking has to be at a certain level. Up to you how you decide that. As far as fair between the new team and the existing team, I don't actually think that should be an issue. Everyone, when they join a team, is going to find themselves in that situation. So if you've got a team and you've got 2 or 3 existing ones and your existing ones are also looking at building their clientele, and a new person comes in, they're all going to be on the same boat. And let's assume that all of them are equally good at rebooking, then they're just going to have to take them as the appointments fall. If you get a choice, then you can certainly take turns for who gets the next new client. Yeah.
Okay, cool, thank you. And we've got another question here, and just bear with me as I read it out. I set my targets based on their wage, so 4 times wage plus retail percentage plus rebookings. What do you recommend to your clients for calculations? I hope I've read that right.
That's a big question. I kind of have a bit of a giggle with 3 times, 4 times, 2 times. I'm not sure who came up with what it should be. Your accountant is the person who needs to check to make sure that whatever the percentage is works for your business. What I do know is that one of the traps we fall into is we make the calculation incredibly complicated. And most of our team, and it's not just in beauty and in hair, but we're not mathematicians. You need to make it as simple as possible. Making sure that it's profitable, that's up to you and your accountant. You know your numbers. The exercise that I did before on Nicole, I was using 3 times. But again, is 3 times correct? It really depends on your rental. That's your big determining factor. If you're in a Westfield shopping mall, then I suspect 3 times and maybe closer to 4 times. But if you're off a high street and you've got a good landlord, it can drop an awful lot lower. Your accountant is the only person who can help you work through that. We will, of course, as a coaching organisation, we have a view on it, but that would be after a fairly detailed discussion with you. But I would still, even after that discussion, make sure that you run it past your accountant. I go back to what I said before. I want it to be simple. To me, the perfect number is, let's just say the number that we want them to hit is $4,000 or $3,000, whatever it is. For me, that's going to include everything. It's going to be retail, it's going to be services. I want to make it as simple as possible for you to hit. the calculation behind it can be as complicated as you want, but when it comes to your stylist or your therapist, one simple number. Not uncommon for salons to say, look, in order to get it, you've got to hit a minimum standard of rebooking, or you might have a minimum percentage there for retail. But don't make it too complicated. Okay, keep it nice and simple.
Okay, thanks, Mark.
Hope I've answered it.
That's great. Our time is unfortunately over time, so we do need to finish now. So thank you all for putting in your questions. Thank you very much, Mark, for joining us today. Really appreciate
My pleasure.
We do run...
We've got our frog number on the screen. Also, just have a look at the website there. We've got frog coaches throughout Australia and New Zealand, and we'd love to help you.
Okay, that's great. Now, we do run the same session again tomorrow. If you've got some more questions and you suddenly think, oh, I wish I could ask that, then you do get that opportunity again tomorrow at the same time. Just check out the website and go from there. So thanks again for everybody here. Thank you very much and have a fantastic rest of the day.
Goodbye.